The rain pounded the streets of Chicago like an unrelenting drumbeat, flooding the sidewalks and turning the night into a blurry haze. I, Destiny Williams, a 28-year-old black nurse at Chicago's Central Hospital, dragged myself out of the emergency room after a grueling 12-hour shift. My eyes burned with exhaustion, red-rimmed from the endless cycle of life and death, patients crashing, monitors beeping, blood on my scrubs. My feet ached in my worn sneakers, every step a reminder of the chaos I'd just escaped, a stabbing victim who barely made it, a child with a fever that wouldn't break, and the constant undercurrent of judgment from colleagues who still whispered about my urban background. I pulled my thin coat tighter around me, the cold wind whipping rain into my face as I hurried toward the rideshare pickup zone. Water soaked through my sleeves, chilling my skin, but I didn't care. All I wanted was my tiny apartment on Maple Street, a hot shower, and bed. My phone buzzed with the app notification, a black BMW waiting nearby. I spotted it idling under a flickering streetlight, sleek and out of place in this gritty neighborhood. Without a second thought, I yanked open the back door and slid inside, collapsing onto the leather seat. The warmth enveloped me like a blanket, a stark contrast to the storm outside. Maple Street, the corner with the apartment complex, I muttered to the driver, my voice barely above a whisper. My head lolled back against the headrest, eyes fluttering shut almost immediately. The day's weight pressed down on me, memories of a patient who'd coded on my watch, the doctor's curt dismissal when I suggested a different treatment, the subtle side-eyes from staff who assumed I didn't belong in this high-stakes world because of my skin color. I'd fought for this job, clawing my way through nursing school on scholarships and sheer will, but nights like this made me question if it was worth it. As the car pulled away, the rhythmic patter of rain on the roof lulled me deeper into sleep. I didn't notice the figure already seated beside me, or the way the air shifted with an unspoken tension. In that moment, all I knew was relief, unaware that I'd just stepped into a vehicle that belonged to someone far more dangerous than the storm raging outside. The engine hummed softly, carrying me into the unknown, my breath steady and deep as fatigue claimed me completely. Little did I know, this mistake would unravel my world in ways I could never have imagined. As the car glided through the rain-slicked streets, I sank deeper into oblivion, my body finally surrendering to the exhaustion that had been building all day. The hum of the engine blended with the steady drum of water against the windows, creating a cocoon that blocked out the world. I didn't stir, didn't sense the shift in the air when the vehicle turned away from my intended route. In that moment of vulnerability, I was completely unaware of the man seated mere inches away, his presence as silent and commanding as the storm outside. He was Ji Kong, though I wouldn't learn his name until much later, a 32-year-old kingpin ruling over Chicago's Koreatown underworld. His empire thrived on fear and precision, built from shadows where deals were sealed in blood and loyalty enforced without mercy. Ji's hands, scarred from years of climbing that ruthless ladder, rested casually in his lap, one fingertip brushing the concealed pistol tucked into his coat. He had expected solitude in this ride, a brief respite from the constant calculations of his life. Instead, he found me, a stranger slumped against the seat, my breath soft and rhythmic, my nurse's badge glinting faintly under the dashboard glow. Ji studied me with a mix of intrigue and caution. My dark skin, framed by disheveled braids pulled back from a long shift, told a story of resilience he rarely encountered in his circles. No makeup, just the raw fatigue etched into my features, quivering eyelids, slightly parted lips. He could have signaled his driver to stop, could have ejected me with a single word. But something held him back. Perhaps it was the innocence of my sleep, a rare glimpse of peace in his chaotic existence. Or maybe it was the subtle strength he sensed, the way I carried myself even in repose. Quietly, he leaned forward and murmured to the driver, Minjun, his 30-year-old right-hand man, a loyal enforcer with eyes sharp as blades, drive on. Circle the blocks. Minjun glanced in the rearview mirror, his expression a flicker of disbelief, but he obeyed without question. The car continued its aimless path through the downpour, weaving past neon-lit storefronts and deserted alleys. G settled back, his gaze lingering on me, pondering this unexpected intrusion. For 45 minutes, the only sounds were the rain's relentless assault and my steady inhalations, a fragile harmony amid the underlying peril. He didn't wake me, didn't probe. In that suspended time, I became an enigma to him, a variable in his meticulously controlled world that he chose, inexplicably, not to eliminate. The minutes blurred into a hazy void as the vehicle meandered through the drenched avenues, the downpour a constant veil obscuring the city lights. I remained lost in slumber, my body limp against the cushion, oblivious to the detour or the subtle vibrations of the tires on uneven pavement. My head, heavy with weariness, gradually tilted sideways until it rested against something solid, a shoulder, though I didn't register it in my dreams. In that unconscious state, fragments of the day's ordeals flickered, a patient's desperate gasp, the sterile scent of antiseptic, the sting of a coworker's veiled remark about my persistence in a field where I supposedly didn't fit. Unseen by me, the atmosphere inside thickened with unspoken strain. Minjun gripped the wheel tighter, his glances darting to the mirror every few seconds, his brow furrowed in silent astonishment at this bizarre intrusion. He had driven for G in countless high-stakes scenarios, evading rivals, transporting illicit cargo, but never with an uninvited passenger dozing so trustingly. The wipers slashed rhythmically, mirroring his internal debate, signal the boss or wait for orders? G, meanwhile, sat motionless, his posture a steady and controlled poise. He felt the slight pressure of my temple against his arm, the warmth seeping through his sleeve, an anomaly in his armored existence. His mind raced through possibilities. Was this a setup, a clever plant by enemies? Yet, as he examined my features up close, the smooth curve of my cheek, the faint lines of strain around my mouth, the laminated ID proclaiming my role in healing, he dismissed the notion. No spy would expose themselves so vulnerably. The tag read Destiny Williams, RN, a title that evoked images of compassion amid crisis, worlds apart from his realm of extortion and shadows. 45 minutes elapsed in this fragile equilibrium, the storm outside echoing the brewing intensity within. G contemplated rousing me, demanding an explanation, or simply halting to expel this complication. But he hesitated, drawn by the rarity of such unguarded tranquility. My even respiration cut through the silence, a counterpoint to the chaos he orchestrated daily. In that extended loop around the blocks, he chose an action, allowing the moment to stretch. The peril lay not in overt threats, but in this quiet disruption, a harbinger of upheaval, like the calm eye of a hurricane promising turmoil ahead. As the car circled back toward familiar territory, the tension coiled tighter, unseen forces aligning in ways that would soon shatter my ordinary life. I jolted awake as the car lurched to a halt at a red light, my neck stiff from the awkward position. Blinking rapidly, I tried to shake off the fog of sleep, the world outside smeared by sheets of water cascading down the glass. The glow from street lamps pierced the interior, casting elongated shadows that danced with each passing vehicle. My heart skipped a beat when I registered the opulence around me, supple leather under my palms, a dashboard gleaming with polished chrome accents, the faint hum of a high-end climate system. This wasn't the standard rideshare I'd summoned, it felt like stepping into a private sanctuary, far too refined for a quick trip home. Then my gaze shifted sideways, and everything froze. There he was, a stranger in the adjacent seat, his profile sharp against the dim light, features etched with an intensity that sent a chill racing up my spine. His eyes, dark and penetrating, locked onto mine without a trace of surprise, as if he'd been anticipating this exact moment. Broad shoulders filled his tailored coat, and a subtle aura of authority clung to him like cologne, commanding, unyielding. Panic surged through me, my pulse thundering in my ears. How had I missed him? The realization hit like a slap. I'd climbed into the wrong car, blinded by fatigue and the storm. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I must have gotten the wrong one. I stammered, my voice cracking as I fumbled for the door handle. My fingers slipped on the wet metal, the rain's roar intensifying as I cracked it open a fraction. Wind whipped droplets inside, soaking my sleeve further, but the downpour beyond was a wall of chaos, puddles reflecting neon signs, pedestrians huddled under awnings. I hesitated, torn between the urge to bolt and the impracticality of dashing into the deluge without cover. The man didn't move at first, his silence amplifying the awkwardness. I could feel his scrutiny, assessing me from head to toe, my rumpled uniform, the damp curls escaping my ponytail, the exhaustion carved into my expression. Who was he? A businessman? Something about his composure screamed otherwise, a quiet power that made the hairs on my neck stand up. Please, I didn't mean to intrude, I added hastily, inching toward the exit, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. The light turned green, and the car eased forward, sealing my momentary indecision. In that split second, I wondered if fleeing now would be wiser, or if staying put might unravel something unforeseen. His command sliced through the confined space, low and unwavering, "Sit still." It wasn't a shout, but the authority in his tone rooted me to the spot, my hand freezing on the handle. The door remained ajar, rain splattering in like unwelcome intruders, but I couldn't bring myself to push it wider. My breath caught, a whirlwind of fear and confusion swirling inside. Had I just sealed my fate by lingering? The engine purred as the light changed, propelling us forward into the night, the cityscape blurring past. I twisted in my seat, studying him more closely under the intermittent flashes of passing headlights. His jaw was set, features chiseled with a precision that spoke of discipline, perhaps survival. A faint scar traced his wrist, vanishing under his cuff, and his fingers toyed idly with a silver lighter, flipping it open and shut with practiced ease. No wedding band, no obvious jewelry, just that emblem of a bird etched into the metal, hinting at stories I didn't want to uncover. "Who are you?" I demanded, my throat dry, forcing the words out despite the knot tightening in my chest. He didn't respond immediately, his focus shifting to the window where rivulets traced erratic paths. Then, without turning, he asked, "You're a nurse?" The question hung there, casual yet probing, as if he'd already pieced together fragments of my life from a single glance. I nodded instinctively, my defenses cracking under his steady composure. "Yes, I just finished my shift at the Central Hospital." I was so drained, I must have mixed up the cars on the app. The explanation tumbled out, laced with apology, but he cut me off with a subtle wave. "Understood." His voice softened a fraction, though it retained that edge of finality. "Next time, avoid dozing in unfamiliar vehicles. This city isn't forgiving." There was no malice, just a matter-of-fact warning that carried the weight of experience. I swallowed, piecing together the implications. His poise suggested he navigated dangers I could only imagine, worlds removed from my sterile wards and beeping machines. Why wasn't he furious? Most people in his position might have exploded, yet he exuded a calm that unnerved me more than anger ever could. As the block slipped by, I debated pressing further, but his profile discouraged it, eyes fixed ahead, mind elsewhere. The silence stretched, charged with unspoken questions, leaving me to grapple with the surreal turn of events. What had I stumbled into? And why did his presence, though intimidating, not scream immediate threat? The vehicle pressed on through the deluge, tires slicing puddles and sending sprays arching into the gloom. I shifted uncomfortably, my mind a tangle of unease and curiosity, the stranger's warning echoing like a distant thunderclap. The dashboard clock glowed 11:47 p.m., mocking my earlier plans for a quiet night. Buildings blurred outside, familiar high-rises giving way to dimly lit warehouses on the edge of Koreatown, where shadows seemed deeper, secrets thicker. "I really appreciate this, but please, drop me at the next intersection. I'll summon another ride," I ventured softly, my tone measured to avoid escalating whatever this was. My fingers clenched the edge of my bag, knuckles whitening against the fabric, as if gripping something solid could anchor me in this surreal detour. He turned slightly, his expression easing just enough to reveal a glimmer of something human beneath the stoic facade. "No necessity." I'll ensure you reach your destination. His words carried a quiet insistence, not forceful but immovable, like a current pulling me along despite my resistance. You don't have to. Quiet for a moment, he interjected, his voice steady, almost gentle. Resting again would benefit your well-being more than constant regrets. There was no edge to it, no condescension, just a pragmatic suggestion that left me speechless. I fell silent, absorbing the implications. This man was accustomed to directives being followed without debate, his world one where hesitation could prove fatal. Yet, he hadn't dismissed me outright, hadn't shown the disdain I'd encountered so often, from patients who requested someone else or supervisors who questioned my competence based on appearances alone. As the wipers swept back and forth, clearing brief windows in the torrent, our glances met in the reflection of the side mirror. His eyes held a depth I couldn't decipher, perhaps weariness mirroring my own, or an unspoken recognition of shared isolation. In that fleeting exchange, amid the rhythmic splash of precipitation and the faint scent of leather mixed with damp earth, a peculiar bond flickered to life. It wasn't trust, not yet, but an invisible thread weaving between us, a black nurse navigating prejudice in a demanding profession, and this enigmatic figure commanding respect through sheer presence. The city lights streaked by, illuminating fragments of possibility, as if the storm itself conspired to bind our paths. I leaned back, not sleeping but pondering, the tension evolving into an odd serenity. What lay ahead remained shrouded, but in this enclosed space, the divide between our realities began to narrow, one unspoken word at a time. 3 days blurred into a monotonous routine, the encounter with the mysterious man fading like a half-remembered dream. I convinced myself it was a fluke, an odd footnote in my chaotic life as a nurse, buried under stacks of charts and the relentless beep of monitors. No messages, no sightings, just the grind of shifts at the hospital, where I patched up strangers and ignored the lingering ache in my muscles from endless hours on my feet. That night, the heavens unleashed another torrent, transforming Chicago's streets into swollen rivers under a moonless sky. My shift ended late, around midnight, leaving me drained and eager for solitude. I bundled into my coat, the fabric still damp from the morning commute, and ventured into the alley behind the building, a shortcut to the bus stop, lined with overflowing dumpsters and flickering sodium lamps. The precipitation hammered down, muffling distant sirens and the occasional honk from traffic. Halfway through the narrow passage, a sharp screech pierced the din, tires skidding on slick asphalt, followed by guttural shouts and the unmistakable crack of gunfire. My blood turned icy, instinct screamed to retreat, but curiosity, or foolishness, pinned me in place. Around the corner, a black SUV veered wildly onto the curb, its headlights shattering against a brick wall. The door flew open, and out stumbled the man from the car, his frame hunched, left arm clutched to his side, crimson seeping through his fingers onto his shirt. Behind him, 3 figures emerged from the darkness, faces obscured by hoods pulled low, weapons glinting in the lamplight, one with a blade, another brandishing a pistol, the third wielding a bat. They closed in fast, their movements predatory, intent on finishing what they'd started. Spun, his stance defensive despite the injury, eyes wild with adrenaline. No. The cry escaped my lips before I could stop it, raw and piercing, echoing off the walls. G's head whipped toward me, recognition flashing across his pained features. Run, he barked, his command laced with urgency, waving me off with his free hand. But my legs refused to obey. My heart pounded like a war drum, vision narrowing to the scene unfolding, the attackers pausing momentarily at my outburst, one sneering as he advanced. Fear clawed at me, memories of past vulnerabilities surging, being overlooked, underestimated, but something deeper rooted me there. I couldn't abandon him, not after that strange night. As the first assailant lunged, knife raised, time slowed, and I braced for the chaos about to erupt. Without hesitation, I surged forward, my grip tightening on the flashlight from my bag, a makeshift weapon in this nightmare. The closest attacker, knife gleaming under the sporadic light, charged at G with feral intent. Adrenaline flooded my veins, sharpening my focus amid the chaos. I swung hard, the metal connecting with a sickening thud against his skull. He staggered, clutching his temple, a guttural groan escaping as he dropped the blade clattering to the pavement. G didn't waste the opening. Despite his wound, he pivoted with lethal grace, driving a fist into the second assailant's midsection. The man doubled over, wind knocked out, collapsing in a heap as G followed with a knee to his chin, sending him sprawling into a puddle. The third figure, seeing his comrades fall, hesitated only a heartbeat before bolting into the shadows, footsteps fading into the relentless cascade. We both crumpled to the ground then, breaths ragged, the world narrowing to the sting of cold water on my skin and the metallic tang of blood in the air. G leaned against the wrecked SUV, his face pale, hand pressed to his side where fabric tore open, revealing a jagged gash oozing steadily. I crawled closer, my training overriding terror, fingers probing the injury with practiced urgency. "You require stitches," I stated, my voice trembling yet firm, ignoring the shake in my limbs. "Your pulse is fading fast." He looked up, eyes widening in disbelief amid the pain. It's you again," he rasped, a weak attempt at composure cracking through. "I must staunch this now," I insisted, shrugging off my coat to use as a compress, pressing it against the laceration. Warm fluid seeped through the material, staining my palms, but I held steady, forgetting the peril we'd just escaped. My mind raced through protocols: assess depth, control hemorrhage, prevent shock. The alley felt smaller, the downpour a deafening barrier isolating us from help. G winced but met my gaze, a flicker of something raw crossing his features, gratitude, perhaps, or astonishment at my resolve. "Why didn't you flee?" he murmured, his strength ebbing. I didn't answer immediately, focused on tying the makeshift bandage tighter. In that frantic interlude, amid the pooling crimson and howling wind, I realized this wasn't just instinct, it was defiance. I'd faced dismissal and doubt my whole career, reduced to stereotypes in sterile halls. Here, in this brutal tableau, I refused to yield. As his breathing steadied slightly under my care, the bond forged in crisis deepened, transforming strangers into reluctant allies against the encroaching dark. Under the hazy beam of the alley's lone bulb, I worked methodically, my sutures pulling the ragged edges of his skin together with steady precision. The gash was deep, slicing through muscle near his ribs, but I blocked out the gore, channeling years of drills. Warm liquid trickled over my knuckles, mixing with the chill of falling droplets, yet my focus held: sterilize, align, not. He endured without a flinch, his chest rising in shallow rhythms, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "Who are you, truly?" I whispered, not lifting my gaze from the needle's path, the question slipping out amid the hush. A pause stretched, broken only by the splatter on concrete. Then, in a voice roughened by agony, "Someone everyone dreads. But right now, powerless against a black nurse like you." I tied off the final stitch, finally meeting his stare, intense, shadowed by vulnerability. "I've dealt with prejudice my whole career," I confessed, my words steady despite the tremor in my core. Patients demanding different care because of my hue, staff shoving me aside in crises as if my skills were tainted. Yet I stayed, because healing defines me. And here, you're just another soul needing aid, whether kingpin, vagrant, or foe. He drew a ragged breath, his frame slumping further against the vehicle. The admission hung heavy, exposing cracks in his armored exterior. "No one challenges me," he murmured, a faint edge of wonder threading his tone. "They bow or perish. You simply act." "Because survival taught me that," I replied, packing away my kit with deliberate motions. "I've been discarded on curbs, overlooked in rooms where decisions meant life or demise, all due to assumptions about my origins. But I rose each time, refusing to let bias erase my purpose." "Saving you?" "It's no different, humanity overrides labels." The alley seemed to contract around us, the torrent forming a curtain that isolated this raw exchange. His eyes, usually veiled in command, now reflected a mirror of my own struggles, isolation forged and powers forged for him, in marginalization's grip for me. In that suspended instant, amid the crimson stains and relentless wash, our visions locked, not as adversaries or savior and saved, but as equals glimpsing shared fragility. The boundary between our realms dissolved slightly, forging an unspoken pact in the night's embrace. As thunder rumbled afar, I sensed this wasn't closure, but the dawn of something profound, where wounds extended beyond flesh. After the makeshift surgery in the alley's grim embrace, a nondescript gray sedan materialized from the murk, its engine idling with ominous quietude. I wiped my stained hands on my pants, glancing at G as he struggled to stand, his complexion ashen from blood loss. "I'll manage from here," I murmured, but he shook his head weakly, his grip on my arm surprisingly firm despite his condition. "Get in with me," he insisted, his words a labored exhale. Doubt flickered through me, venturing deeper into his domain felt like courting disaster, but seeing him sway, breaths shallow and erratic, overrode my caution. I nodded reluctantly, supporting his weight as we shuffled to the car. The driver, a silent figure in the front, averted his eyes, accelerating smoothly once we were inside. We bypassed any medical facility, the route twisting through 3 bustling districts before veering into a secluded lane. The sedan halted before a 3-story brick structure, its facade unadorned, windows absent like sealed eyes guarding secrets. No signage hinted at its purpose, it loomed stark against the weeping sky, isolated yet unassuming. "This isn't a clinic?" I questioned, my pulse quickening as I helped him out. "No," he replied faintly. "Safer here." The door yielded to a hidden panel, revealing an interior that defied expectations. No armed sentinels patrolled, no cohorts lurked in corners. Instead, a sterile aroma of disinfectants permeated the air, mingling with the faint strains of classical piano, Chopin, its melody weaving through the dim corridors like a fragile thread of normalcy. We navigated to a pristine chamber, walls painted clinical white, dominated by an adjustable bed equipped with monitors and trays of instruments. Overhead lights hummed softly, casting even illumination without harsh glare. I eased him onto the mattress, my scrutiny intensifying. This wasn't a standard setup, it resembled a private sanctuary, stocked for emergencies yet devoid of institutional bustle. Cabinets held bandages, fluids, and surgical tools, all meticulously arranged. The music emanated from a small device on a shelf, its notes a counterpoint to the violence we'd fled. As I prepared to continue treatment, questions swirled: what fortress was this? And why did it feel like stepping into his hidden core, stripped of defenses? The absence of threats only amplified the intrigue, drawing me further into a labyrinth where healing intersected with enigma. I worked with deliberate focus in the stark room, the needle piercing his flesh in even strokes as I closed the laceration. He lay still, eyelids sealed against the discomfort, his body rigid but silent, no cries, no protests, just controlled inhalations that betrayed the torment beneath. My fingers trembled faintly from the adrenaline's aftermath, yet the thread held true, binding torn tissue with the precision honed from countless emergencies. "You'll need rest, at minimum, a full day," I declared, my timbre resolute as I snipped the excess suture. "You've hemorrhaged significantly." "Impossible," he countered, eyes opening to meet mine. "A meeting awaits at dawn." I held his stare, unflinching, the weight of our shared peril fueling my insistence. "Then prepare for collapse. I've pulled you back twice now. Don't force a third into morning rites." He regarded me for an extended beat, then a subtle curve touched his lips, not the icy smirk from our initial crossing, but one laced with fatigue and a hint of surrender, warming the edges of his guarded demeanor. "No soul has addressed me that way in a decade," he admitted, his inflection carrying quiet astonishment. I set the antiseptic pad aside, lifting my chin. "So you're accustomed to instilling terror?" "More to orchestrating obedience," he elaborated, shaking his head slightly. "Others comply or vanish." You stand firm, offer no apologies, pose no inquiries about my identity. You simply intervene. That's my vocation, I responded plainly. And my survival mechanism. Space for deference evaporated long ago. The confession lingered between us, the piano's soft arpeggios filling the gaps, a fragile bridge over the chasm of our disparate existences. In his vulnerability, stripped of his authoritative veil, I glimpsed the man behind the myth, the isolation of command, the toll of perpetual vigilance. My own history echoed in that revelation, shifts where my input was dismissed, promotions bypassed, lives entrusted yet my worth questioned solely for my heritage. Here, in this concealed haven, roles inverted, I wielded the power of restoration, compelling him to confront his fragility. As I bandaged the site, securing it with tape, his hand brushed mine briefly, a tentative contact, electric in its rarity. The air thickened with unspoken acknowledgments, the barriers crumbling under the force of mutual exposure. In that intimate interval, healing transcended the physical, weaving threads of understanding where none had existed before. As G settled into repose, the melody from the device softened the chamber's edges, its notes drifting like whispers in the subdued glow. I lingered on the stool beside the cot, intending to depart, when his query pierced the quiet. Destiny, what do you make of me? The words hung suspended, laden with unspoken burdens. I paused, absorbing the vulnerability in his timbre, a rarity for someone so entrenched in dominance. I don't require your full narrative, I responded evenly, my gaze steady on his form. But if aid is essential, I'll provide it, regardless of status as outlaw, magnate, or wanderer. That's the essence of my calling. He closed his lids, the subtle rise of his chest betraying inner turmoil. A single tear escaped, tracing a path along his temple, glistening briefly before vanishing into the pillow. No one witnessed it but me. In that unguarded instant, the facade of invincibility cracked, revealing a soul scarred by isolation and choices long regretted. Rising slowly, I retrieved my lightweight jacket from the hook, its fabric still carrying traces of the evening's turmoil. With gentle care, I draped it over his shoulders, tucking the edges to ward off the chill seeping through the walls. The gesture felt instinctive, an extension of the compassion I'd extended in the lane, nurturing not just the body, but the hidden fractures within. He didn't stir, perhaps feigning slumber to preserve dignity, or genuinely succumbing to fatigue. I stepped back, the floor cool under my soles, a faint floral essence from my lotion lingering in the air, a subtle reminder of my presence amid his solitude. Turning toward the exit, I felt the pull of conflicting emotions, empathy for his concealed pain, wariness of the shadows he commanded, and a quiet resolve born from my own battles. I'd navigated dismissal in corridors where my expertise was undermined by preconceptions, endured isolation in a profession that demanded unflinching dedication. This encounter mirrored those trials, extending mercy where none was expected, bridging divides through action rather than words. As the door clicked shut behind me, sealing him in repose, I carried forward the weight of that exchange. The corridor stretched dim and empty, echoing my footsteps, but within, a shift had occurred, a tentative alliance forged in empathy, where healing transcended mere flesh to touch the essence of who we were. Outside, the tempest had eased to a drizzle, mirroring the fragile calm settling over my thoughts. 3 days dissolved into a haze of routine shifts, the memory of that hidden sanctuary lingering like a faint echo in my mind. No further contact from G, no calls, no shadows tailing me through the corridors. Relief mingled with an odd emptiness. I'd returned to the familiar rhythm of vital signs and hurried consultations, convincing myself our paths had diverged for good. Yet, a subtle undercurrent of anticipation hummed beneath the surface, as if the city itself held its breath. That evening, as I wrapped up tending to a young accident victim, his fractured arm set, his mother's grateful tears wiped away, my phone vibrated discreetly in my pocket. I slipped into the break room, the fluorescent hum overhead casting stark highlights on the linoleum. The message glowed on the screen: stay inside the facility. If questioned about your identity, evade. I'll arrive soon. My stomach twisted, a surge of apprehension flooding me. Who was pursuing him now? And why involve me? I deleted the text swiftly, glancing over my shoulder at the empty space, the distant chatter of colleagues filtering through the door. The clock ticked toward midnight, my shift concluding amid a fresh wave of arrivals, gunshot wounds from some street altercation, a reminder of the violence simmering just beyond these walls. As I gathered my belongings, the storm renewed its fury outside, winds howling against the glass. Emerging from the rear entrance, shielded by an overhang, I scanned the lot. A black cab materialized from the mist, headlights cutting through the veil, pulling up without fanfare. The driver, a stoic silhouette, gestured wordlessly, unlocking the rear. Hesitation gripped me, stepping in felt like crossing an irreversible threshold. But curiosity, laced with concern, propelled me forward. Inside, the interior was dim, warmed by heaters against the chill. No conversation ensued, the driver merely accelerated, navigating the slick roads with mechanical efficiency. On the seat beside me lay an envelope, crisp and unmarked. I tore it open, unfolding the note under the passing street glow. Assist me once more. Not with needles this time. With your choice. The words ignited a storm within, dread, intrigue, resolve clashing like the elements outside. What decision did he demand? And how had I become entangled in his web? The cab sped toward an unknown horizon, the river's edge looming in the distance, as I clutched the paper, bracing for whatever revelation awaited in that forsaken villa. The cab halted abruptly before a derelict mansion perched on the banks of the Chicago River, its silhouette jagged against the roiling waters, overgrown vines clawing at crumbling stone. Fog rolled in from the waves, shrouding the structure in ethereal mist, as if it guarded forgotten sins. I exited cautiously, the gravel crunching underfoot, my senses heightened by the isolation, no neighbors, no lights piercing the obscurity. The door creaked open on rusted hinges, beckoning me into a foyer thick with dust and echoes. There he sat at a weathered oak table in the main hall, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the bandage I'd applied days prior, untouched and pristine. His posture slouched slightly, features drawn with exhaustion, yet his gaze burned with clarity, cutting through the dimness like a beacon. "You came," he stated, his voice a gravelly murmur, laced with relief and strain. "You're under siege," I observed flatly, not phrasing it as inquiry, my eyes scanning the room for threats, empty shelves, faded wallpaper peeling in strips. "Insiders in my network sense my withdrawal from their grasp." "You're the sole individual I can rely on," he confessed, his cadence hoarse, mirroring the gusts whipping branches outside. I held his stare for an interminable stretch, the air heavy with implication. "What do you truly seek from me?" He didn't reply instantly. With deliberate slowness, he withdrew a compact pistol from his waistband, placing it on the surface between us, then sliding it toward me with a nudge. "Either guide me to exist as an ordinary being one final instance," he proposed, his expression unreadable, "or terminate this existence here and now." I regarded the firearm, its cold steel reflecting the scant illumination from a dangling bulb, then lifted my view to him. "Do you realize," I uttered softly, my resolve hardening, "I'm no executioner. Yet, I've evolved beyond the submissive healer who mends and fades away." The proposition hung like a noose, the river's murmur seeping through cracks, amplifying the gravity. In his plea lay a surrender I'd never anticipated, the architect of dread seeking redemption from someone like me, forged in adversity's fire. My thoughts churned, the prejudices I'd shattered, the lives I'd reclaimed against odds. This juncture demanded not mercy, but a verdict on his soul, and perhaps my own entanglement in his fate. The pistol remained inert, a symbol of crossroads, as silence enveloped us, pregnant with the storm's impending fury. I stared at the weapon between us, its barrel catching the faint glimmer from the overhead fixture, a silent arbiter of destinies. My pulse echoed in my ears, the river's churn outside mimicking the turmoil within. Slowly, deliberately, I extended my hand and nudged it back toward him, the metal cool against my skin. Decide for yourself, I said, my voice unwavering, cutting through the charged atmosphere. But if you choose existence as a mortal, free from carnage, from dominance, then rise and accompany me out of this void. Leave the violence behind. He absorbed my words, his frame tensing as a wry grin tugged at his mouth, not mocking, but laced with defiance, a spark of the old resolve flickering in his eyes. And you truly salvage me? He challenged, leaning forward slightly, testing the boundaries of my conviction. I didn't waver, meeting his intensity head-on. That's my forte, I affirmed. But this round, it's not flesh I'm mending. It's your essence, the core battered by years of command and isolation. The declaration settled like a vow, the air thickening with its gravity. For a suspended breath, he held my gaze, the storm's rumble vibrating through the decayed walls, as if nature itself awaited his verdict. Then, with a measured exhale, he reached across the expanse, his fingers enclosing mine in a grasp firm yet tentative, warmth seeping through, a conduit of unspoken surrender. We stood together, the pistol abandoned on the wood, its threat diminished to irrelevance. He rose unsteadily at first, leaning on me for support, our steps sinking as we moved toward the threshold. The portal groaned open, admitting gusts laced with moisture, the downpour a cleansing veil beyond. As we crossed into the open, droplets assaulted us, soaking through fabric and chilling exposed skin, but we pressed on, hand in hand, navigating the overgrown path toward the water's edge. The mansion receded into obscurity, a relic of his former dominion, while the horizon hinted at dawn's approach, pale streaks piercing the overcast. In that exodus, amid the relentless wash and the river's murmur, a new chapter unfolded. No more evasion, no lingering specters of authority, he embraced the unknown beside me, a black nurse who defied odds her entire path. We'd rebuild, not from ruins of power, but from fragments of humanity reclaimed. The tempest enveloped us, yet for the first time, it felt like liberation, a fresh commencement, unbound and resolute.